You're listening to Today at Museum of the Bible. These exclusive conversations with authors, scholars, and specialists visiting the museum focus on how they are currently engaging with the Bible in their lives and work.
Hello and welcome to Today at Museum of the Bible. I'm Charlotte Clay, and today we're here with a very special guest, Kathy Reeg, the president of the Elisabeth Elliot Foundation. The Elisabeth Elliot Foundation does some amazing work, and I'd love for you to tell us a bit about the story of Elisabeth and Jim Elliot and get our listeners excited to come visit the exhibit at the museum all about Elisabeth Elliot.
Well, it's a delight to be here.
Yeah.
Thank you for inviting me. And Elisabeth Elliot is an incredible woman that was an ordinary woman who did pretty extraordinary things for the Lord when she was called. She was born in Belgium and then returned to the States. Her parents were missionaries and returned to the States, grew up, was off at boarding school, went to Wheaton College, and felt led to go on the mission field. Before she left, she met Jim Elliot. There was kind of a love match there, but nothing transpired until she got to Ecuador, and it just so happens they both went to Ecuador.
Yes. I didn't realize that. Okay.
Yes, and so, and Jim was kind of on the thread of, anyone on the mission field doesn't get married. A true man of God stays single.
Right.
And so, but he'd already declared his love to Elisabeth. So she had that in the back of her mind too. Yeah. And they continued to correspond. And then when they both got to Ecuador, lo and behold, God gave him the green sign, and said, go for it. So they got married and they began to serve, and they were in Shandia. And then she, and he got involved with other missionaries that were there who really had a heart to reach and unreached people.
Right.
Mm-hmm. The Wadani, which they called the Auca at that time because Auca meant savage.
Oh,
and so they knew that they were a savage tribe because there were so many killings.
Mm-hmm.
But they wanted to reach out to those people. So they eventually did reach out, had some contact with them, and there were 5 missionaries landed their plane and had this outreach. I mean, documented it on camera, on video.
Right.
It was tremendous to see that. But there was miscommunication there, and the Indians actually thought that they were cannibals. So they murdered all of the 5 missionaries. And so Elisabeth stayed in the jungle, as did many of the other missionary wives. I mean, here were these 5 widows and little children.
And what year was this again?
This was in 1956.
Okay. Yeah.
Right. So long before most of us,
shortly
after I was born, yes.
Yeah.
But Elisabeth had a 10-month-old child, Valerie. And so she waited a short time until Valerie was about 2.
Yeah, wow.
And then she and then one of the sisters of the other missionaries, Rachel Saint, went back in to the jungle, to this tribe.
That's amazing. They went back to the same tribe where this had occurred and went to serve there. It's incredible.
Well, and Dayuma, who was actually a member of the tribe, she and another woman came out of the tribe in fear because they were fearful for their own lives.
Oh, wow.
So they came out, and they'd been living with the Quechua, and that's where they got to know them. And so then they gave the invitation, said, come back with us. We want to tell the story. When Dayuma became a believer in Jesus, then she said, I want my people to hear this story.
And Dayuma left because she was afraid after the killing of Jim and...
Well, there were other killings in her family, and so that's what she was afraid of.
Wow. And Elisabeth took her in.
Took her in. And she became very instrumental in learning the language, working on the Bible translation.
Yes, right? Dayuma did, and Rachel Saint and Elisabeth both. That was kind of their key thought. I mean, their salvation was first and foremost. They wanted to share the love of God to them. And I mean, they were a remote tribe. And these killings were incredibly savage. I mean, it literally, like we can't even hardly discuss when you start reading what happened. But they were so brutal, but it was because that was their life. That's what they did. You got angry with somebody, you killed them.
Yeah.
You know, so they really felt impressed, and they didn't tell anybody they were going, going back. I mean, they were very quiet about it because, of course, their families were in fear.
Would not have been too happy about that. I can imagine. Yeah.
And so they carried Valerie on. They made a little wooden chair, carried her on. Elizabeth on her back.
Yeah.
Some of the.
There's an incredible photo of that.
There is.
In the exhibit.
Yeah.
Yes.
Cornell Kappa took that.
Oh, yeah.
It's amazing. But so the Quechua took them in as far as they would go into the jungle.
Got it.
They went in and they accepted them, and they lived with them for 2 years.
It's unbelievable.
Yeah, it is. I mean, Dayuma had told them to build a house or something for Elisabeth to stay in. And they built this really tall, because Dayuma told him that she was tall. And so it's really tall, and everyone else is short. Here is this woman who's blonde,
right,
blue-eyed, among all these people. No walls, nothing.
Just a high roof.
Yes. And so can you imagine living there with your daughter, and no privacy whatsoever?
Wow. Yeah.
I mean, that's incredible to any of us.
Yeah.
When you think about it.
So she stayed for 2 years among the tribe.
Yes. That killed her husband.
Yeah.
It's unbelievable.
And then how long did the Bible translation work take? That took quite a while, didn't it?
It took a long time. Yeah. It took a long time. And there were Rachel and she, to be honest, and everybody pretty much knows, we're all human, right? And we all have personality differences. And she and Rachel Saint were cut from two different molds. Rachel really was very close to Dayuma. And so they even had come back to the States and done, I can't believe they did this. This Is Your Life. There was kind of a promotion of Dayuma at that time. You have to remember, this is the 1960s, 50s, it's a whole different way we live today than then. And so they kind of took her around for people to see. I think of Pocahontas too.
Yeah.
The same thing with her.
Yeah.
And so Dayuma was really unhappy. She wanted to get back. But she was close to Rachel, and Rachel was I don't know that Rachel was truly a linguist. I mean, I don't know that was her study. And see, Elisabeth was an expert at it. And Dayuma had been really compromised by living with the Quechua.
Oh, right.
So Elisabeth felt like the translation of the Wadani had been compromised by Quechua. Sure. And she wanted to be sure that it was pure.
Yeah, yeah.
And so Rachel felt like it was okay. And so they clashed in that area, and they tried to work it out, but in the end it wasn't meant to be. And I do believe even Wycliffe, pretty much Rachel Saint gets the credit.
Right. Yeah, I think typically, right.
But Elisabeth, you have here all of her
notes. Right.
And the box with every bit of it.
Yeah.
So she really deserves to have some credit there, as does certainly Rachel Saint.
Yeah, Dayuma, right, said project, right. So, and the translation, I think, was early 70s. It was finally completed.
I think so.
72 was the New Testament, I think.
I think so.
So long project, right?
A long project, but if you listen to the tapes, and we have some on our website, of the language itself, it's like, how do you figure this out? I mean, what they're saying.
Well, English is hard enough to figure out. So.
Yeah.
But Elisabeth, obviously that work was central and a real key part of her life, but she continued to serve in many different ways after that, right?
She did. When the relationship began to go a little south, and Rachel ended up staying in the jungle. That's where she lived the rest of her life and died in the jungle. Elisabeth felt called to go back. And of course, she'd already written Through Gates of Splendor, which was the
very popular
actual book that all the widows contributed the their husbands' journals. And so she wrote the book. She was kind of put in a room in New York, and they said, write it. You can do it.
Yeah.
Write it. So she did. And so after praying about it, she was like, Lord, what do you want me to do from here? And it was go back to the States. And there were times she would think, you know, I've told this story how many times? And the Lord would say, this is your story. This is, you know, your life, your testimony, and you need to continue to. People want to hear this.
Yeah.
So she came back and spent the rest of her life not just telling that story, but really speaking into the hearts of and lives of women, of families, of men, of a personal relationship with Christ, what it looked like to trust and obey. Truly.
Right.
Yeah.
So she wrote, how many books did she end up writing?
It was close to 30.
30
I think
books,
it's like, it might be 28.
Wow.
I mean,
And you mentioned yesterday, how many languages have these been translated
oh my
into?
gosh. You know, I should have looked that up. I have a spreadsheet.
Oh, yeah.
With all the languages, and it's really overwhelming to see. I mean, I think it's like close to 50 or more, and we're talking before you guys internet.
Right.
For AI.
Before,
translate, right?
I mean, you didn't even make international
Right.
calls
Yeah.
hardly at all. It was just kind of like,
Yeah.
And then when was the movie made? I mean, that was a huge success, right?
Which movie?
I'm thinking of Tip of the Spear, right?
Okay, The End of the Spear.
End of the Spear.
There's two. Well, there is a movie called Through Gates of Splendor, and if you
Right.
haven't seen it, it's the old from the 60s, you know, like
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
fast and kind of, you know, but it's really pretty pure as far as what the background is. It's actual footage.
That's so cool.
They're in the jungle.
Yeah.
And that's really great. But of course, that's a historical film, more of a documentary.
Right.
type.
Yeah.
Steve Saint, he did, and Mark Green worked together, and they did End of the Spear.
Have you gone over yourself?
No. Gosh, no. No, I haven't. Do I have a desire to?
Yeah.
No, I don't think so.
Yeah.
I don't think God's calling me. Now I know Ellen Vaughn, who's written one of the biographies. There are two currently out there, and then she's writing the second volume. But
She's gone?
yeah.
Yeah.
And I don't think Lucy Austin went.
Yeah.
But Ellen did go.
Wow.
I mean, I know it's very, very remote.
Oh, it's
Yeah.
very remote. Yeah, like if you went during the rains, you'd be sliding down hills.
Yeah.
When Lars went and Elisabeth together in the 90s, and they had opportunity to see Rachel Saint again. So that was really sweet. I literally have a picture of she and Elisabeth when Elisabeth was about to get on the plane, hugging each other.
Wow.
Goodbye. So that was, and Rachel died not too long after that.
Yeah.
But that was really sweet.
Yeah.
I mean, we know they're surrounding the Lord right now together in heaven, as will we, we be. But but they had kind of made some amends there.
Yeah.
First, it said first and last. She had written on it, first and last hug.
Wow.
Oh.
So
Now, we have the exhibit, Kathy, because you connected with the family and preserved the items that Elisabeth had kept all these years. And eventually those came to the museum, about 800 objects. How did that all happen? I mean, how did you get connected with Elisabeth and Lars and it lead to this foundation work?
well, that's an interesting story, because I have thought many times to myself, Lord, how in the world did I get involved? But I always go back to Gladys Aylward. Are you familiar with her as a missionary in China? And she said, there had to be someone else far better, far more educated, far more ready to do this task that you've called me to do, Lord. But he looked down and just said, there's Gladys. She'll do it. And I think that's what he did.
That's a great quote.
I think that's what he did. He just looked down and said, there's Kathy. She'll do it.
She'll do it.
So anyway, but I literally met Elisabeth in the early 90s, and she was a mentor from afar, just like she has been for thousands and thousands of people.
Right.
Yeah.
But I never met her other than just, on stage after she spoke and read her books. And then in early mid 2000s, I began corresponding with her husband, Lars, and talking on the phone together and getting some of her things. And then we just struck up a relationship. And so they would come to our house and stay on their way to Florida and different things. And you can imagine the first time they came, you know, I just was like,
Yeah.
"Well, here's Elisabeth
Yeah.
Elliot, and she's,
Living legend.
yes."
Yeah.
You were like, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
And so from that then developed that relationship. And when she died, I was at the house, not when she died, but at the funeral. And then we went back up a few weeks later. It was shortly after, and I can't remember specifically unless I went back to my journals. Was it the night of the funeral, or was it when he and I went back a few weeks later, my husband and I? But we were on our knees praying with some of the caregivers, and God just impressed me. Preserve and protect, preserve and protect. You need to start a foundation. I think it was at the funeral because I asked somebody else who was really close to the family. I said, I think there needs to be a foundation. And she said, oh, we'll have at it. She was like,
Good luck with that.
yeah, good luck with that. And I'm like, okay. So I just but I walked in and here's the baseboard. They had baseboard heats. They had a gorgeous home that Elisabeth had designed that was on the ocean, and from every window you could see the ocean.
Wow.
She had designed it that way. But, you know, it was an older home, and it was here were all these artifacts. Here was the spear on the baseboard.
They had them displayed there.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't really displayed. It was just
lying there.
Yeah, lying there. And
Whoa.
going upstairs, here's the blowgun in the corner.
Whoa.
Here's that, you know, and I'm like, so the Cornell Kappas are in this huge leather folder that Cornell had given her.
Yeah, the photographs.
With all the originals in there. It was underneath the buffet, you know, in the dining room, you know, and all these, and in this case was, you know, of course, the headdress and all these different things. And so as I looked at it, I was like, Lord, I don't know what you want me to do here.
Yeah.
So that was 2015. And so I just, like scripture says, Mary took it and pondered it in her heart. I just did that, you know, for several years. And I would talk to Lars about it periodically and say, there really needs to be a foundation, or we need to preserve these things.
To tell this story. Yeah.
And he was like, well, nobody really cares. Nobody's going to. But eventually I got him to concede, and I just got on the phone and called. I always laugh and go straight to the top because it's like, okay. So I called Mark Green. Just picked up the phone, found his number. I think I may have called White Pages. I looked at White Pages or something. Yeah. Call Mark Green, and he calls me right back. And so I said, Mark, you know, what do you think about all of these things? Because I thought he would be the source. I didn't know the connections with the Museum of the Bible. And he's like, oh, you need to talk to Steve. And I said, okay. So he said, I'll have him call you. So Steve calls me, and he says, how about if Jackie and I fly to Massachusetts? And I said, okay, well, I'll fly up too. And so we met. Wow. And that was in 2018. Yeah.
I didn't know that story.
Yeah,
that's cool. That's amazing.
Connected to museum staff and started trying to figure out what was there and how to get it to the museum, and COVID and all those kinds of things. But
all kinds of things. Yeah. They came. Amy came when Wheaton came too. Their archives, because most of Elisabeth's papers are Wheaton, and so they kind of came together, and we kind of partner with you all and Wheaton as well for the foundation, the Elisabeth Elliot Foundation. But in 2020, finally, I got the green light from both Valerie and Lars, and they said, sure, you should do it.
Yeah.
And so
here we are.
We made application, put a little website up in June of 2020, kind of the anniversary date of 5 years since she had died. So here we are 3 years later.
Yeah. And so now there's about 800 objects that from her collection that are part of the museum?
Yes. It's just important to me that these things be preserved.
Stay with the collection.
Yeah. It is.
So what do you think of the exhibit?
Oh my gosh. Well, it's hard to put into words
Yeah.
Because of course for us, and I'll try not to get emotional as I talk to you all, but it's an incredibly moving exhibit. Amy's done an amazing job.
Yeah. Agreed.
You know, she has, and it's just really the tip of the iceberg.
Right.
I mean, it's just there's so much more, and so plans and different things for further on. You know, we could talk about that later, but the exhibit itself, I've heard people say, just people walking through too. When you walk in, it's like you feel the presence of the Holy Spirit. It's just there.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think the way that they have done it is amazing. It looks I think Elisabeth would be so pleased. And I wish Lars was in a position that he could see it. I have shown him pictures and he gets really emotional about it. But the exhibit itself tells the story. And for those who are not familiar with her,
Yes. Yeah.
you know, it really tells the entire story that I think is an inspiration to people.
Oh yeah, and I was going to ask you to talk a little bit about how the Wadani transformed through the forgiveness that Elisabeth showed. I know that's a big piece of the exhibit, the redemptive arc there.
It is, and I think people always are impressed with the fact that she could go back in and forgive them. But she didn't want people to be impressed with that.
Yeah, yeah.
She was like, what is there to forgive?
Yeah.
They didn't know better.
Right.
They had no idea.
Right.
And she said, it's not about my forgiveness toward them. They didn't know any better.
Right.
So
this is many generations of
Yes.
killing any outsiders.
yes. And there was truly
And insiders, I think, too. Yeah.
Yes, and there was truly not a miscommunication, a real deception there, because this one tribesman was already married, and he really wanted to marry the young girl who they called, all the missionaries called her Delilah.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah. So she came in, and this was before they even knew. They didn't know anything about it.
Yeah.
But he wanted to marry her, and her family was opposed to it, and so they had a chaperone with them, and so that was the older woman, and so they went off by themselves together. And when they came back to the tribe, then they had told tribesmen, well, where's your chaperone? And so they made up a story that they had run away from those, those people.
Oh no.
Because they were cannibals.
Yeah.
They were going to kill them. They were
Okay.
going to eat them.
Yeah.
They were going to, so they made it up to save their own skin,
Yeah.
literally.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
I didn't know that
Yes.
story. Wow.
So that's why it was the a cover up. And so, yeah, and eventually that particular one was killed, but it was still an interesting concept because Elisabeth really wanted to know what happened. So she interviewed as soon as she got into the tribe. Of course, she couldn't understand. I mean, they were still working through, but Dayuma
was translating.
could translate.
Yeah.
And so she interviewed, and that's actually on tape. And so we have that. I believe it's on the website in our archives.
Yeah.
That's really.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So she interviewed to find firsthand
Yeah.
what really happened.
Yeah.
What really happened.
And they were willing to share?
They shared.
Yeah.
They shared. But when she got with them, she was so overwhelmed by their love and their compassion and their not holding grudges or not, it's just really, so it was so strange
Right. Right.
that it was just really a way of life for them.
Yeah.
Because, look at Valerie, growing up for those couple of years that she lived with them, she was just like one of them. Of
Yeah.
course, they look different
Right.
on the outside, but
Yeah.
Right.
we're all the color of water in God's eyes. Yeah.
Amazing.
Wow.
So I think Valerie's biggest takeaway was she couldn't figure out why in the world when she got to the New York, they got off the boat, why people had clothes on everywhere. She just couldn't figure that out.
Yeah.
Well,
So yeah, living in that way.
Right. She was really one of them a bit. Yeah.
Yeah.
well, it's an amazing story.
It is.
Thanks so much for preserving it and continuing to make it known and helping bring it here to Museum of the Bible.
Yes. Yes. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your partnership, and thank you for being willing to take it in and to, to preserve literally and protect
Yeah.
these artifacts and her life.
And thank you for joining us on Today at Museum of the Bible. Wrap it up.
Thank you for listening to Today at Museum of the Bible. Join us again to hear how authors, scholars, and leaders are engaging with the Bible every day. Only on Today at Museum of the Bible.